In honor of Women's History Month, welcome to the Women Leading Greater Good Wednesday series. My name is Dr. Angela Johnson, Managing Director of Alliance for Greater Works. And throughout the month of March, Alliance has been highlighting the achievements of 5 extraordinary women and inspiring women through this educational series. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that this series is being conducted virtually, so you may hear some home or office noises in the background, and we apologize now and ask that you just bear with us as we all adjust to this new virtual world. As a 21-year-old nonprofit organization, Alliance has been developing leaders to uplift and transform communities so that all people have opportunities to thrive. And one of the ways that we do that is by developing women leaders and telling their stories. Today, we will be exploring the life of Harriet Tubman, a remarkable abolitionist, a Civil War leader, and a humanitarian. We have prepared a short video with 5 lessons that we have gleaned from her extraordinary life, and this video will be followed by a panel discussion with our guest, Greer Christian, and our very own Sherry Willis. We also have Mia Hernandez from the Alliance team serving as our tech support for today. So we just want to thank you all for joining us, and we'll take a look at that video. As leaders, why is it important for us to receive God's purpose, plan, and power for our lives? So that we can discover where to lead, what or who to lead, and how to lead. And you know why God's presence and wisdom are important. If you've ever had to pray before work, go to your car or the ladies' room during the workday to pray, or pray yourself home after a particularly toxic workday. As agents of God, labor abolitionists create more equitable communities because we all want to live in communities where we can be our best. Today, we will be introducing you to Harriet Tubman, an abolitionist, Civil War leader, and humanitarian. In honor of Women's History Month, welcome to the Women Leading Greater Good Wednesday series, an educational project of Alliance for Greater Works. Every Wednesday throughout the month of March, we have been providing lessons from the lives of some extraordinary women. Number 1, maintain perspective. Harriet Tubman was born into enslavement around 1820 on Maryland's Eastern Shore. She would later recount one of her earliest memories of work began around the age of 5 or 6 when she was hired out as a nursemaid. The job given to young Harriet was to rock a sick baby all night long, and if she accidentally fell asleep or the baby began to cry, the baby's mother, a Miss Susan, brutalized young Harriet. The scars on her face and neck remained visible for the rest of her life. When she was in her teens, she shielded another unfree laborer who was fleeing from a brutal oppressor. A young Harriet suffered a severe head injury that nearly cost her her life when the oppressor hurled a 2-pound iron weight that, in her words, broke her skull. Like the scars on her face and neck, the subsequent sleeping spells, dizziness, and painful headaches caused by this head injury would also remain throughout her life. It is through this brutal backdrop of unfree labor that maintaining perspective is key, because all men, women, and children are created by God the Creator and thus are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Number 2, listen, understand, and stay alert. In 1844, she married John Tubman, a free man of color, and hired a lawyer to trace her mother's cause of freedom. The lawyer found that Mrs. Tubman's mother was indeed legally free, but as a slaveholder, Edward Brodess refused to acknowledge the evidence or the mother's freedom. This discovery, as well as Mrs. Tubman's subsequent illnesses brought on from her head injury, forced Mrs. Tubman to stay alert when Brodess tried to sell her. In her words, Mrs. Tubman asserted, "I prayed all night for my master till the 1st of March, and all the time he was bringing people to look at me and trying to sell me. I changed my prayer. 1st of March, I began to pray, 'Oh Lord, if you ain't never going to change that man's heart, kill him, Lord, and take him out of the way.'" Edward Brodess passed away on March 9, 1849, and fearing that the entire family would be separated and sold by Eliza Ann Brodess, Mrs. Tubman fled Maryland without her husband. Traveling by the North Star at night and hiding in swampy marshes by day, she made her way to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a free state that to this day has never been on the wrong side of history. Number 3, let them underestimate your power. In Philadelphia, Mrs. Tubman cleaned, cooked, and saved enough money to return to Maryland to rescue other members of her family. In 1850, she made the trip to Baltimore, where she led her sister and 2 of her sister's children to freedom. Allied with Frederick Douglass, William Steele, Thomas Garrett, and other labor abolitionists, Mrs. Tubman became the most successful Underground Railroad conductor. Underestimated and equipped with only her knowledge of botany, wildlife biology, geography, and astronomy, as well as a gun to goad those who wanted to return and medicinal herbs to quiet crying babies, Mrs. Tubman made at least 15 trips guiding more than 300 men, women, and children to freedom, including her entire family. Despite large bounties offered for her capture and the capture of the men, women, and children, those unfree laborers she was freeing, it is commonly believed that all of the people in her care made it to freedom safely. Number 4, aim to be a step ahead. Mrs. Tubman had to be ready for surprises and for the unexpected, or as the elders would say, she had to be ready to take the devil in people seriously. After Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which required Pennsylvania as well as other states to return escaped laborers, Mrs. Tubman settled runaways in what is now Ontario, Canada. As Mrs. Tubman's reputation grew, she continued to gain support and friendship from some of the day's leading labor abolitionists like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, Sarah Bradford, and William Seward. Some scholars even note that Mrs. Tubman helped plan the raid on Harper's Ferry with John Brown in 1859, but fell ill and was unable to join him. In the spring of 1860, and on her way to Boston to attend an anti-slavery meeting, she stopped in Troy, New York. Always a step ahead, Mrs. Tubman undertook the very public rescue of Charles Nall, who had been followed to New York by his younger brother, who happened to be his slaveholder. Mr. Nall was being held at the office of the U.S. and the instant Mrs. Tubman heard, she forced her way into the office and rescued. 2nd, 1863, she helped to lead the Combahee River raid against the Confederate Army, and in the process freed over 750 enslaved laborers. Although she received commendation from the U.S. Army, she received no pay. But despite the slight, her defenses, her mind, her will, and emotions were strong, and she returned to Auburn, New York. After the Emancipation Proclamation was signed outlawing unfree labor in the U.S., Mrs. Tubman spent her later years working for women's rights. In 1869, she married Union Army veteran Nelson Davis. And prominent friends tried for 2 decades to convince the U.S. government to give Mrs. Tubman a pension for her wartime services, but the U.S. government refused. In 1890, she received Davis's widow's pension. Okay, leaders, we've come to the end of this session for this week, and because you've stuck around, here's your bonus for staying with us until the end. Stay spiritually, mentally, and physically tough. Passionately faithful to God, Mrs. Tubman's faith informed not only her personality, but her actions. An icon of democracy, Harriet Tubman will always be known as the Moses of her people because, like Moses, she helped people escape from enslavement and unfree labor. And in the process, she continues to teach labor abolitionists today to stay spiritually, mentally, and physically tough. Harriet Tubman went home to be with the Lord on March 10, 1913, and just before she passed away, she told those in the room, "I go to prepare a place for you." Mrs. Tubman was buried with military honors at Fort Hill Cemetery in Auburn, New York. If you are a woman with a desire to lead, we invite you to join us in creating real change in our communities and in the world. Everything we have learned as corporate, nonprofit, and social enterprise leaders has been crafted into the Women's Executive Leadership Program. Go to alliancetx.org and enroll today. Use the promo code WELP$50 to waive the registration fee. Wow, what a fascinating and a remarkable woman. Before we dive into this discussion that I want to be as organic as possible, for those of you who have just joined us, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists today. Greer Christian has positioned and advised premier organizations and premier leaders in areas of social impact, financial services, and consumer goods. During her 25-year career, she has successfully managed multi-million-dollar businesses for industry leaders such as Walmart, JP Morgan Chase, and the Tom Joyner Foundation. Her passion is equipping entrepreneurs with business tools to achieve their dreams. She's very active in the community, and she serves as the board chair at Impact Ventures and is on the executive board committees for Trinity Habitat for Humanity, Housing Channel, and the National Black Sports Professionals. She finds joy in sharing her business acumen with the next generation of leaders as an adjunct professor at Texas Christian University, Neely School of Business, and Southern Methodist University, Simmons School of Education, Sports Management. Greer also spends her personal time with family and friends, traveling, rowing, golfing, reading, and listening to her favorite podcast. Thank you, Greer, for being with us today. Our next panelist is our very own Sherry Willis, founder and CEO of Alliance for Greater Works. She's foremost a servant leader. She values and embodies a biblical view of leadership that seeks the welfare of others, engages the gifts of all, heals divisions, and accomplishes shared goals. She founded Alliance in 2001, answering a call to serve organizations working in under-resourced communities. In her first book, Launching Greater Works, Turning a God-Inspired Vision into a 501c3 nonprofit, details her founding journey and offers inspiration and practical advice for leaders. Passionate also about developing the next generation of women leaders, she is currently a doctoral candidate at Biola University. In her ever limited spare time, Sherry loves listening to jazz, traveling, reading, and spending time with her best friend and husband, Joe. So thank you, Sherry and Greer, both for being with us. And we want to thank our audience for being with us as we discuss the life and legacy of Harriet Tubman. So Greer, I want to start by congratulating you on your recent appointment at Walmart. And as I think about Harriet Tubman's life as a descendant of enslaved and free people of color, I can only speculate what life was like for my ancestors. But in my heart, I know that they resisted and they survived so that I can be here, so that we can be here today having this conversation. So I want to ask you, why is it important for us to continue to tell Harriet Tubman's story, and not only her story, but other stories of resistance, so that we can show people who have experienced enslavement how they resisted this labor injustice?
Well, thank you, Angela. First of all, a beautiful video about Harriet Tubman, and it's just really interesting to you hear, throughout your life you hear the stories about Harriet Tubman, but when you see it all together, you're just even more amazed at her ability to do the things that she did, from an enslavement standpoint. And I would like to thank, the Alliance for Greater Works for having me today. Thank you, Sherry Willis, for being a dear colleague in this work around just inspiring our women and just really just impacting the community altogether. So both of us, you and Dr. Johnson, we both go back. So thank you guys for reaching out to me for this wonderful discussion. So Dr. Johnson, to answer your question, why is it important for us to continue to tell stories of Harriet Tubman, as well as others? Because, our fight is still going. Things have gotten better. We have made progress, but, we have setbacks. People, as I would say, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. So there are a lot of things that we're putting forward, particularly from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint. But you have to remember that a lot of these people have been operating one way for a long time. So there's constant pushback, constant education, learning and development that needs to take place, and using these stories to use as analogies, as well as opportunity for us to learn and grow. If we can draw upon these stories, of course, our history will help us move the future forward. And I'm a big component of learning from other people's experiences. I can't learn from everyone. I can't, I'm going to have my own experience, but sometimes if I learn from someone else, I can avoid a particular experience. So watching or watching others, as well as learning about the history of all the fighting that our ancestors have done for us, will help us to continue to be smarter, to be more strategic in our approach. One thing that I've done recently, actually I've been doing this week, I've been listening to Judge Ketanji Brown Johnson and her hearing confirmation. And I listened to a lot of it when it was being aired live. A lot of it I could not listen to because I started to get angry for her. But something told me, Greer, you know what? Go back and listen to her hearing confirmation. But what I really did, I went back to watch her body language. I had to ask myself, what did she do to ensure that she was able to accept some of the conversations that was happening, and how she was able to just really hold her composure. Because I've been in situations where, I kind of blew up a little bit. So I had to learn from her experience, and I watched her, and I learned a lot of things from her experience that I can now take along in my career, and also share with mentees that I may come in contact with. So it's very important to watch those who have taken the journey ahead of us, and we can take those learnings and add them to our everyday life.
I'm glad you brought up the confirmation hearings with Ketanji Brown Jackson. Yes, she was the epitome of grace, in such under pressure, under injustice, all of those things. And I know Sherry, as a founder and leader of Alliance for Greater Works, an organization dedicated to developing leaders, but also focusing on under-resourced communities, so communities that have experienced injustice. I want to know, how powerful is Harriet Tubman's story and accomplishments as a woman of color, and as a labor abolitionist, especially considering the fact that labor enslavement and injustice continues to persist today? And I would like to know, in what ways does Mrs. Tubman's story empower you?
Well, thank you so much, Angela, for just being a part of this conversation. You have done an excellent job over the last 4 weeks to really just do an amazing job of sharing about women. Harriet Tubman is one of my all-time favorites. And as I have gone back in recent years, as I worked on a major project where we were working in marginalized communities where we were experiencing the Ku Klux Klan, and we were seeing some major things. This story and Harriet's story just really was like such a ray of hope for me, and a light of hope for me. And as a woman, to know her story and to know where she came from, that she came from being a child slave who was injured, head injured, and how God took who she was, all of the pain from the injury of her head, and he used that as for her glory, for his glory, and he used it for her to be a leader in helping her people to come out of slavery. And I believe today God is calling many women of color to really be that voice of hope, to be a leader who's not afraid, who's willing to be fearless and walk through all of the challenges that they have, the injustices that we experience. As you mentioned, Judge Ketanji, oh my goodness. I sat and looked at a lot of those hearings several different times. I looked at her body language, but I listened to what came out of her mouth. And for me, leadership is what she showed. And we saw that same type of leadership in Harriet. Harriet was a powerful woman. Just to see how God used her and to use her innate gifts and talents to guide people out of slavery, how she went through these rivers and at night, and she was, looking at the star and all the herbs. I mean, I love, when I heard about that, I was like, oh yeah, now that's Sherry. I love herbs. But for me, it was just powerful to see how God will take everything that is in you to use it for others. And he will allow you to be a vessel of hope for people that can bring them some sense of, I am okay, I can do this, I can live a life of freedom, I can live a life of liberty and justice. That's what we are working on today. When I think about the communities that we were working in, and we saw some of the people who were even afraid to talk and to give their point of view on something. And by us being there and them seeing two African-American women like Angela and myself who were willing to stand up, they were like, okay, well, I can do this too. So I believe that we are called today even to be a vessel of light for others. And You know, as I think about Harriet, I just see so many great things about her, Dr. Angela, that is so many lessons in her life and in her journey that we can take today and use to just be vessels of light for others.
I love the fact that you brought up the calling, so God's calling. And through this short video, you know, we've been given a little glimpse into her life, and we know that she started working at the age of 5 or 6 as a very young child. But she had this innate ability to be able to see her world and know that it went against who God created her to be as a child of God. And so as we consider, you know, Edward Brodus's and the Brodus family's refusal to actually even recognize the fact that Harriet's mother was free, and if the mother was free, then the children more than likely were free. But we see this playing out against this time in US history where human beings were considered property, and human bondage was fundamental to the culture and fabric of this nation. So I want to know from both of you, how would you describe Harriet's story, and what does her life and legacy mean to you, and what should it mean to us today?
Sherry, I'll let you go first, since you talked about Harriet really being one of your key leaders in your life.
Yeah, you know, there's so much about her that I just absolutely loved, as I said to you earlier. And one of the things that I oftentimes think of when I think of Harriet is I think of her, it wasn't just what you saw, it's what she had on the inside of her that really carried her far. And, you know, what I saw about her is that the weapons of her warfare was not things that you could see. She used prayer. You know, when you think about praying for Brodus, and, you know, and then and things like that can happen. God can, I have seen God where you pray and you can be in a meeting and you can see God move in a situation and you know it's God. So I just see, I believe her legacy is that she trusted God. She was, by any means necessary, she was willing to do whatever he told her to do. And she had that keen sense of, I like to call it the Holy Spirit. That's what she had. And that was what guided her. You know, in today's time, if she was here today, we would be calling her a GOAT, because she's the greatest of all time when we think of a woman who really followed God and was willing to do whatever it took. So as it relates, I hope I'm answering your question, Angela, but
Absolutely.
because I can just talk about Harriet all day. But, you know, it's really about the fact that she was willing to be obedient and be a vessel that was willing to do whatever it took to be obedient to God. And that's the legacy that I believe. I mean, when you think of her last words, you know, it was, I go to prepare a place. So she's a leader, and she was in the Word of God when she left here. The other thing that was really powerful for me about Harriet is that she knew how to lead and she knew how to serve. And it was clear in how she partnered with other people. But everything she did, it was all pointing back to freeing people. And so to me, she knew what her purpose was when she started her work. When God called her, she knew what she was called to do. I'm gonna stop there.
And, you know, Sherry, you talked about, you know, her foundation in her faith in Christ. And And, you know, having that type of foundation, it allowed her to be resilient as well as allow her to persevere. You know, when you think about when you're when you're in a situation, you know, like you said, Sherry, you know, you can be in a meeting and you can actually pray and you can see God moving. But a lot of that, really all of that comes back to just having that foundation in your faith, and he'll give you the tools that you need to be resilient, to fight against all of the spiritual warfare that's going on around you, as well as the perseverance to keep moving forward, because it's hard. It's not easy work. You know, we're talking about Harriet, you know, in the past tense. But when you actually think about the things that she went through, it was a challenge for her. And you know, she talks about, you know, in the video, it talks about how she had to be physically fit. You have to be mentally strong, as well as just ensuring that you just had the resources in order to do the things that you could do. And that was Harriet, and she left that legacy for us to feed upon. And you know, I don't think we talk enough about Harriet and the work that she's done. I don't think we talk enough about a lot of our ancestors and the work that they've done. But that's something that, you know, we as a culture, we have to make sure that gets done on a consistent basis, because you know, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and there was a young lady who is now she's a director, and she directed a commercial on one of the highest one of the most watched stages of entertainment just recently. And I'm listening to this young lady. She's talking about, you know, yes, when I go to, you know, sit at these tables with these executives and these decision makers, you know, I let them know, you know, and she's African American. I let them know that, you know, I'm gonna get what I want out of this situation. But she said it in a way as if there were no ancestors who helped pave the way for her. And I think that we're doing our youth and our young adults a disservice by not trying to really educate them more about our ancestors. And if it wasn't for them, we would not be where we are today. And so yes, those stories need to be told. And a legacy like Harriet Tubman, oh my goodness, that woman did it all. She did it all. And she had a great husband who was there to support her. So just all of that, just wrapped up together, is enough to have a good Bible story, a Bible story study about just her life and how she really looked to God for guidance. So yeah, I'm just in awe of what I'm learning more about Harriet Tubman. And like you said, Dr. Johnson, I'm sure there's a lot more stories out there that we can pull from to help us in our daily lives.
Absolutely. Angela, I want to hear what you think. I know you've done a lot of research, and I know that Harriet is also one of your favorite people. I'd love to hear your point of view.
So I think that you both have brought up some very interesting points, one about her faith, but also the second one about the fact that we have relegated her to 1 month. No, we relegate her entire life and what she did to 1 month. And here she was, a woman who is freeing enslaved people. And when you think about that, first of all, she's a woman. When you think about people freeing enslaved people, you typically think about men. You don't think about a woman. She does have this faith in God and is led by God, and she's illiterate. So, she can't read the Bible for herself. So this is all what God has placed in her. And then the other point that I want to make is the fact that she is so knowledgeable about not only the landscape and medicinal herbs, but astronomy and science. But if we were to think about it from the standpoint of what we've learned in school about enslaved people, what we've learned in school about women, we look at her and go, well, we discount her because she doesn't really fit any of the boxes that we've been taught. And I think that's why it's so important. Greer, you said this, that we do young people a disservice, but that's why it's so important for us to continue to teach young people about not only African American history, but human bondage was fundamental to the making of this country. And that, even though the Emancipation Proclamation was signed and enslaved people got free, those systems have continued to impact our lives. So we have to keep telling the story, and we've got to tell it from multiple perspectives, because we're not thinking about Harriet Tubman as a naturalist. We're not thinking about her as a scientist. We're not thinking about her as a leader. We just see her as during Black History Month, she freed the enslaved people during the Underground Railroad. Most successful conductor never lost a person.
That's right.
And we probably talk about it one day out of that whole month.
If even a day. But the other part you find about Harriet that's so powerful to me is that she had such tenacity, and like you said about her age, her strength. She was very strong to think how she was leading these people. But I also think about her leadership skills. Where did she learn this? Where did she learn these leadership skills?
The Holy Spirit.
Exactly. That was my whole point. That was not something that was taught from a book.
Nope.
Because she couldn't read, really.
Because she couldn't read.
Right.
That's right.
And so she had to really trust God to really tell her what to do and how to do it. And I just think that is so important for us today. It's great to be educated. It's great to have masters and bachelors and, be in control. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the Holy Spirit, you don't have the right mix. You don't have all that it takes. And I'm firmly a believer of that, particularly as a woman of color, because you already walk into the room and they underestimate you. And I love that about what you said in the video of let them underestimate
your power.
Yeah, because it's okay. And it doesn't impress me for someone not to know, that they don't know who I am. It's okay. It's okay.
I get angry, but I can get angry.
Angela gets upset when they don't recognize me as a leader, but it's okay. Because I know who I am and God knows who I am. So, you have to trust, and know when it's time to be quiet, when it's time to speak. And when you speak with authority.
Authority. So I want to give y'all a quote from Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman. So that is why we know the most about Harriet Tubman, because her friends who were writers actually wrote down her biography. And she is quoted in that book as saying, there are two things I've got a right to, and these are death or liberty, one or the other. I mean to have. No one will take me back alive. I shall fight for my liberty, and when the time has come for me to go, the Lord will let them kill me. End quote.
Wow.
Those are some strong convictions. I don't know. I don't know in the workplace or in life. If I'm faced with choices, I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm either gonna die here, or I'm gonna stand up for my rights, or I'm just gonna die. But that's what she said. So how do we ensure that people understand? And we kind of touched on this earlier about young activists. What should we be doing to ensure that those that are working to continue to abolish human trafficking, human enslavement, all of these unfree labor systems, the prison industrial complex, what should we be doing to help people understand Harriet's legacy, and how do we continue to promote her legacy as a way for people to glean from her life to end these unjust systems in all their forms globally?
You know, when I read this, when I read this question, I immediately thought about a young lady that I met about 4 or 5 years ago. Her name is Tanya Stanford, and Tanya is the founder of It's Going to Be Okay. And I don't know if you guys know Tanya, but this is how I describe Tanya. Tanya is the Harriet Tubman of human trafficking.
Wow.
She is. Yeah. So if you go to a website, and Tanya and I, we were sitting together at, so this whole underestimating people, we were sitting together at one of Bishop T.D. Jakes', one of his programs. It was a luncheon. And she and I were sitting together. We didn't know who one another was. We were just really just enjoying one another. We started cutting up, if you know what that means, just being silly, just having fun, making light of just being out of the office for an hour or two. And so after the luncheon, we decided to, hey, so what do you do? Tell me what you do. And when she told me what she did, I was just blown away. So basically, Tanya she goes and she finds, people know to call her when they're in trouble.
Oh.
If someone feels that they're in a human trafficking situation, they call her, and this woman would jump on the plane immediately and fly to get those people and bring them to safety. It is amazing. If you hear her story ever, she was a product. She is a survivor of human trafficking.
Wow.
And because she understands and she knows the environment around human trafficking, she knows exactly what to tell people to ensure that they're staying safe until she's able to come and rescue them. Wow. And it was just amazing. I know she laughs at me every time I make the comparison, but she is. And to answer the question, we have to continue to promote individuals or organizations that are working in this space. And then also, although we may not have the complete passion to whether volunteer or serve on board, because these organizations, they're hard to volunteer for. Yeah. But what you can do is support them monetarily, being able to just promote their efforts, and then also just provide resources for them to do the work that they do. So I would just say just exposure. If we continue to expose these situations, whether you're a judge and you're someone is on trial for these horrific acts, putting things in place from a law. Tanya is also a lobbyist. She goes to the Capitol to ensure that some of these laws are being passed, and she has the relationships with the public officials to ensure that she has the support and they have her support as they're making these changes around the world. So yeah, that's my thing. Just support, and then also expose them by promoting them, promoting the work that they're doing.
Angela, what was the question again? I want to make sure I'm answering it.
So these unjust systems, how do we ensure that people know who Harriet Tubman is, one, and two, what should activists be doing to ensure that we continue to talk about her life and legacy, and that we are working to abolish human enslavement in all its forms globally?
Yeah, I think one is we have to keep telling their stories, our ancestors' stories. And I think, one of the things that I really am adamant about is that we learn, like you said, Greer, from our ancestors. And I think the way we keep them alive is that we recognize what they did and how they did it, and we take advantage of that insight that they had. But then we also share that with this generation. And that's what our Women's Executive Leadership Program is all about. We want to take the insights that Angela and myself have learned with our experience, as well as Harriet and others. And we want to teach them about what they can glean as it relates to being a leader. Leader is about setting direction. It's about foresight. It's about thinking ahead and being ahead of. In order to be a great leader, you can't just be thinking about today. You've got to be 2, 3, 4 years down the road, if not longer. You've got to be setting that direction and vision. So that's what Harriet was about. And that's what we've got to train this next generation to be about. It's great to be able to go in and say, I'm going to get what I want. But then after you get it, now what? What are you going to do with it? And how is it going to impact the next generation?
Absolutely. And we're going to pray for Tanya, because
yes.
I know Tanya too. So we will continue to lift her up in prayer, because
yes.
What she is fighting definitely is a spiritual battle.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to ask just one more question, if I may.
Sure.
During Harriet's lifetime, we kind of talked about some of the hardships that she faced, but even after the Civil War, so after her assignment or her calling was over and the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, she went on to fight for women's rights. She went on to make sure that the newly freed enslaved people had educational opportunities, and she even opened her home to the elderly. Mm-hmm. So she was, when we think about that, she was called a thief, she was an outlaw, but she's doing all of these things to help people. So I want to just ask in my final moments here, why do you think that she was so effective and successful? And two-part question, how has her life or her story, how does it impact your own leadership?
Go ahead, Greer.
All right, so your first question, how she was effective. The first thing I thought about was her allies. She had Frederick Douglass. I think it was William Steele, Thomas Garrett. She had those allies that were there to help her really understand, or just to help her to do the work that she was called to do. And honestly, that's how God designed it. Everyone has a calling. Mm-hmm. And your calling is there to support somebody else's calling for God's ultimate glory. So as long as we're being obedient, like you said, Sherry, she was being obedient and she did what she was supposed to do. And I think that's how she was successful, really, just from her faith, listening to God, staying focused on him, and then calling upon those who could assist her in the work that she could do. So how has her life impacted my leadership? Really, what I like about Harriet is that she was very well rounded. You know, she knew anatomy, she knew astronomy, botany. She knew all of that, and she needed those things in order to do her calling. So again, you know, once you're obedient, you listen to God. You wake up in the morning. I know me personally, I wake up in the morning and every day, Lord, just show me what to do. And whether it's me, you know, going back to school, getting a business law certificate, whether it's me going and and becoming a fitness trainer, whatever it is that he leads me to do, that's what I have to do, whether it's education or just learning from individuals like you, Dr. Johnson, and Sherry, learning from your experiences that can allow me to stay well-rounded so I can continue to lead in my efforts. So that's how watching Harriet and all the things that she's done, all the connections and relationship building that she did in order to do the work, that's how her life has impacted me. I feel like that I'm on the right track because some of my life definitely mirrors her life, but definitely not doing as much as Harriet has done. But you know, I'm listening and being obedient to God's calling on my life.
That's powerful, Greer. Yeah, I sincerely agree with you. What I saw about her life is that as she was obedient to God, God opened new opportunities for her to serve others. So she started with one calling, but she continued to serve even after she had accomplished what she was initially called to do. So what that tells me is he's always giving you new opportunities. He's always giving you new levels of learning and growing and leading. And we have to be willing to take that on. You know, when I think about Harriet, and as I said earlier, she empowers me in so many ways. I went back and looked at her movie, the movie that they have where, and it really just was like, huh, you know, I was just like, yes, you know, this woman she was a powerful woman because of who she knew, and that person was Christ. And the things that she went through, I can't even imagine, you know, having to live my life like that. But I was just thinking about it. I wrote down just some thoughts about her. And what I said was, it empowers me to know that the work that I have been called to do, when I think about it individual, what I have been called to do is possible. And I think about the fact that, you know, God called Alliance to the nations. We're not to the nations yet, but through Christ, we can do all things and we can go to the nations and accomplish that. And I want to be like Harriet at 90 plus, sitting and, you know, looking at the next generation of women doing great things. So that's what I'm looking forward to, that as I, you know, be obedient and do what God has called me to do, that I can reach back and serve the past generations, the next generation, by teaching them about what I experienced and what the generation before me experienced, so that they can continue to move forward. Because it's not going to be done in our time. We're going to be still addressing the injustices that we see in systems, the systems of oppression. You know, we saw that loud and clear last week as we looked at the hearing for the judge. You know, it was very clear there are systems of oppression that want to find a reason for someone not to be qualified for something. And so we have to continue the fight that God has called us to whether it's developing leaders, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's, whatever God has called us and put our hands to do, it's all working together for his glory, and so that's what we need to be about.
So putting our hands to the plow.
Yes.
So thank you, Greer and Sherry, for sharing your wisdom with us today. And to our viewers, thank you for spending your time with us. This was fun, and we learned not only a lot about Harriet Tubman, but about Sherry Willis and Greer Christian as well. So although this is the final installment in this series for the Women's History Month, don't forget that you can subscribe. You can go back and watch the videos and the panel discussions at alliancetx.org. And today's discussion will be loaded by Thursday afternoon. If you'd like to learn more about Alliance for Greater Works, the series, or how we develop women leaders throughout the world, or if you know of an aspiring woman leader that's looking for leadership development programming, please share our information with them. And I hope you enjoyed today's discussion on Harriet Tubman. Goodbye and blessings to you all.